What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the library. Grab a seat, grab a snack. Let's have at it. So, admittedly, I try and be the Care Bear on YouTube and bring you information and good news and cheer. But today we're going to talk about depression, and I don't mean mine. 25 years is a long time to be playing PlayStation, and obviously, not all things can be rosy and happy. So I thought it'd be fun, and I mean that literally, to go over some of the most saddening times I have experienced with the system as far as missed hype or just stupidity. So let's get into it. So the first depressing thing I want to talk about is Street Fighter Alpha 2 on the PlayStation. And no joke, I bought my PlayStation system originally just to play Street Fighter Alpha. I loved that arcade game. And the PlayStation version was so well done. It was such a good port that I was super excited for when Alpha 2 is coming out. I was so involved with it that I actually ended up running an Alpha 2 tournament with Capcom at some convention a while ago, a long time ago, and it was the coolest thing ever. Well, we got Alpha 2 on the PlayStation, and it was the most depressing thing I've ever seen. I knew we were in trouble as soon as I booted the game and the opening movie wasn't in-game graphics. It was a terrible compressed video running on the PlayStation. And I was like, oh no. Sure enough, you get to the game, there's, very minimal graphics in certain locations, like the character select screen. Fonts are missing in the super combo meter. It was just so bad. I was so sad. Now, obviously, Capcom redeemed themselves with Alpha 3. That's phenomenal on the PlayStation with all the elbow grease they put into it. But man, after playing the Sega Saturn version of Alpha 2, it was bad. The fourth and third game on the depression list actually come from the same company, Activision. And at the time of this video, they are in crazy straits, but this is not about that. So the first disc is Activision Classics, which is a collection of Activision Atari 2600 games on the PlayStation. On that disc is my favorite Atari game of all time, Kaboom. Now, if you've never played Kaboom, there is a little burglar dude at the top. And he drops bombs, and you have a 3-tier bucket to catch all the bombs. On the original 2600, you had what they called, I think it was called the driving controller. It was a circle that was essentially an analog stick. So like if you turn it slowly, the buckets would go slowly. And if you turn it faster, the bucket would match your speed. It was amazing because you could control the bucket as you needed as the bombs are crazily coming down the pike. The problem is Activision Classics released when there was no analog controller. So the emulator for the games was programmed with the D-pad. The D-pad is not analog. So instead of having that smooth back and forth, the bucket actually skips sections of the stage as you're moving it left and right. The problem is that bombs fall in those sections that the buckets aren't hitting now. So after the fourth wave of drops, Kaboom on the PlayStation becomes broken because you can't catch the bombs like you need to. My favorite game on one system is literally broken on my favorite game system. It was just like, really, guys? Really? Come on. The other Activision game is the Intellivision collection. I love the Intellivision. The Intellivision, for those younger folk out there, was essentially the rival to the Atari 2600. It had better graphics, and you could do a lot more with the system visually, but the controller sucked because it was basically a phone pad, and I mean like a physical landline phone pad, not your damn digital phones, unless you're using the Amico. But anyway, I couldn't wait because Intellivision Bowling is like the greatest bowling game there ever was before Wii Sports and Brunswick on the PlayStation showed up. Bowling on the Intellivision was so far ahead of its time. You literally had to pick up the ball, you could loft it, you could set your curve, your ball weights, you could affect the oil pattern on the lane. That's how ahead of the time it was for like 30, 35 years ago, if not more. When Intellivision Classics came to the PlayStation, they didn't put bowling on it. So now I don't have my favorite game on my favorite system, and to kick me in the balls further, when I believe it was a different company brought Intellivision Lives to the PlayStation 2, the emulation had bowling, but it was so bad. The colors were like this bizarre 80s Trapper Keeper neon set. Like it was so bad. And to make it worse, the pop-up to show you what the inlay of the Intellivision was blocked what you were trying to read in the actual game. It was a 2-generation amount of depression and sadness. The second to last on our list are actually third-party memory cards. Now, I say this as a former Interact employee, but dear God, our memory cards suck. So, for those of you who don't, I mean, we're 25 years past, but for those of you that don't really play hardcore PlayStation, I know I'm going to use the wrong technical term, so bear with me. But basically, the memory card and the controller are on the same, I believe it's called bus, a controller bus. Basically, the controller and the memory card are on the same highway lane that leads back to the motherboard and tells the motherboard, hey, read this, or, take this controller, and so forth. For whatever reason, third-party unofficial products weren't reverse engineered correctly, apparently, because depending on what you're plugging in, it won't work with the other. For example, I'm playing Beyond the Beyond right now for an eventual review. It's going to be months out because that's an RPG. I had a newbie memory card with a Mad Catz Turbo controller plugged in, and Beyond the Beyond said that it could not read the memory card even though I had 3 saves on it. And I was like, that's weird. Okay, so I unplugged the Mad Catz controller, plugged in the normal PlayStation digital controller, and I could read the memory card. All right, cool. So then I got that memory card full, threw in one of Interact's performance memory cards, went to reset the system to reload the new save, and the DualShock Sony controller I was now using wouldn't register in the GameShark menu. So I was like, what the hell? I had to unplug both performance brand memory cards from slots 1 and 2, then plug the controller back in and reset the system, and the DualShock finally worked. So I have to figure out what the proper brand name and controller, aside from first party in both terms, will work to get it playing together. Either the memory card doesn't work or the controller doesn't work. It's ridiculous. But that is not the main point of this depression. The depression is that memory cards like Interacts and Performances and Newbies, etc., is that a majority of the time, the memory that they use in those cards is not the correct memory, and it can die on you. And I have PlayStation 1 memory cards from literally 1996 that are going strong perfectly fine. I have had 4 different third-party memory cards, and they're not multi-card, they're not super blocks, they are 15 block standards, die on me. 3 or 4 of them in the last year. One of them, which I tweeted about when it happened, was 20 hours into Monster Rancher. I watched the memory card die in real time as I was trying to save. And I freaked out, and I went to go try and reload the save, and the memory card was blank. What the hell? So eventually I'll go back to Monster Rancher, but I couldn't even tell you what other saves I lost on that card that died. And I feel really bad. For anyone that was on my Patreon that got the memory card, I have a couple of those left, and one of those died on me. So I would highly recommend just have that as like a little display, like an appreciation statue. Don't use it for your real saves. But finally, the big depression, and this is beyond petty, but it has been stuck in my craw for 25 years. And that is that PlayStation never got Final Fantasy III. When Final Fantasy VII was announced on PlayStation, it set the whole entire world on fire. Like, people couldn't believe Square was leaving Nintendo behind. Like, holy cow, look at all these cinematics, blah, blah, blah. And then Square, because they were still Square at the time, and not Square Enix, said, hey, we're bringing out a bunch of the retro games. So we got, and these are not in the order they came out, but just to build the story, So we got Final Fantasy 5 and 6 of Anthology. Hell yeah, Super Nintendo days. We get the converted game that we never got originally in 5. Go team. Origins comes out, has a completely redone 1 and 2. The 2 we never got in America. 1 was on the original NES. Absolutely phenomenal. If you guys have never played Final Fantasy Origins, play it. The remaster of FF1 is probably one of my all-time favorite remasters. They nailed it perfectly. So then Final Fantasy Chronicles comes out, and it has Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. Now, Chrono Trigger is a phenomenal game in its own right. There's no denying that. Except it wasn't Final Fantasy III, the real 3, that was on the Famicom in Japan. We now had the remaster of 1 and 2 in English, where was 3? So I was like, oh, it'll probably come out sometime when Final Fantasy IX, arrives. It never arrived. So as a PlayStation and Final Fantasy fan, at least of all the things before 10, on that wall, I have Final Fantasy 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It never came out to PlayStation. You know where it came out? The PSP and the frickin' DS. That means, despite owning 8 of the 9 games, the only place as a PlayStation fan you can technically play all 9 numbered Final Fantasy games is the PSP by owning the physical number 3 and then downloading the Final Fantasy ROMs off of PlayStation Network. I was so depressed. I was so depressed, angry, like seriously, like if you want to talk about first world problems, this is my first world problem. It drives me to this day. It drives me insane that we never got 3. And what's even funnier is in Japan, when 13 was coming out, Square did this amazing box set of every numbered PlayStation Final Fantasy. And sure enough, it was PS, PS, PSP, PS, 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 PS2, PS3. And it is just, oh God, seriously, I could rant about this for hours. But yeah, there actually were a couple other things on the list, but I figured I already talked about them incidentally in other episodes, or I might save them for something else. So with me fully now rented and vented, what was your depression? Like, it could be anything. It could be like the smallest missed detail. It could be that you had yourself hyped up for something and it turned out to be terrible. Comment below, get the discussion going, and let's just have a nice group therapy session and get this sadness out of us. You guys be safe, mask up, get the vaccine, be safe. I will see you next episode, and I'll see you on the website. Take care, you guys. Have a good one.